At this time of year, it's real comfy out when I'm driving to the gym in the morning. The sky is that beautiful pre-dawn gradient, and the retards aren't out on the road yet. It's peaceful out. I think it's important to find those small moments of joy. And on the way, there's this big hill, and most mornings, I see these two guys walking. One of them is blind. He's got the blind pokey stick and everything, and they walk up and down that hill with arms linked. But that has nothing to do with anything. I've been playing some more D&D, but at a game shop, so it's kind of a crapshoot how fun the group is going to be. Plus, I can't call anyone a faggot, even if I spell it funny. So the campaign was this Scarab King thing, is a Wild West / Egyptian / fantasy sort of setting. So the party was big and not always consistent. So there are 3 people who were there for some sessions, but not all of them. And that was a goblin artificer who clearly had some kind of character personality in mind that I never really picked up on what it actually was. And a human warlock who's crazy old and doddering, shitty memory, doesn't know what's going on. And I got that through his roleplay and stuff. And a druid of some race. I don't know. I really have no impression of what the actual character was, but the player's cool. He's really clever about how he uses spells and abilities to solve problems. For people who were there for every session, we had another artificer, which was a kenku. That's some kind of hollow bones bird race. No personality that I can remember. Maybe. I don't know. And then a dwarf fighter, who's pretty much a min-max DPS character, and I can't remember him doing any role-playing beyond, like, badass kill moves in combat. And then my favorite guy was a life cleric. I don't know what race he was, but he had a beer theme to everything he did, so tankards as weapons, and he would just be constantly chugging beer and healing people. His character's name was Vortrin. And this is my favorite player, and I played with him in every campaign I've done at this game shop so far, because he's the best. And then my character was a Goliath barbarian, and Goliaths are mountain giants, basically. I made him a barbarian because when I was signing up, I saw that the party was pretty squishy, aside from the one DPS fighter, so I figured they needed a tank. And I found that every campaign I've played here needs a tank, because everyone always wants to play some anemic slug character. So it's Overwatch all over again, and I'm a tank main because everybody wants to be a retard, but nobody wants to be the retard who gets hit. So my character was named Mata Dingus Gillian Kulani. And in Goliath culture, as the lore goes, you get a birth name, and then a nickname, and then your family name. And you typically go by your nickname in most situations. The nickname is given to you by tribe chief or something, and it can change based on your achievements or new developments, whatever. So my character was named Dingus by his chief. And the chief told him that it meant one who takes long strides. And Dingus, being a dingus, thought, oh cool, that's fitting, because I walk really far. And the chief intended for Dingus to take it as, you're very tall, because even for a race of giants, Dingus is quite tall at 8'4". But of course it's just a comment on how dumb Dingus is, because he's got 8 int. What a dummy. And Dingus lives in a tribe of cloud-walking giants. They live in this area of magically solid clouds, and some mountain peaks to poke through. And these clouds are created by a genie named Gastish, and the tribe worships him as their god. And Dingus has an uncle, Zoland, who, in his youth, traveled the world, and when he came back, he was full of crazy ideas, like, the clouds are not solid everywhere, eventually they get thin and you would just fall right through. And everybody says, oh Zoland, you fucking crazy conspiracy theorist, get out of here with your lies and bullshit. But Dingus looks up to his uncle, so he thinks, oh no, that's crazy. You really think that clouds could be like that? So eventually, Dingus gets it into his head that he's going to leave his home village called Zephyr Summit, and he's going to go out and see if the clouds really do stop holding weight, become thin. And so he travels for a long, long way. Because he's Dingus, one with long strides, he travels very, very far. And then he falls through the clouds because, wouldn't you know it, Zolan was right. And that was the last thought he had before he hit the sand. But luckily, Dingus's outrage over nobody believing Zolan caused him to go into a rage, and it allowed him to survive the fall just barely. And he's found by the party, which is a contracted caravan, like they're guarding a caravan. And that's basically the story of how Dingus finds a party, and then you kind of wave your hands about why Dingus just goes along with it, because we got limited time, we gotta get through this. You join up with the party. It's really handy when you play a dumb character that they can just sort of go along with things and it sort of fits the character. So we travel along, and as we approach the town that this caravan was headed to, called Dunehaven, we see a gang of mummies trying to kidnap a giant scorpion. And mummies are one of the funnier types of undead, but it was implied that we should treat them as a threat instead of laughing at the idea of a bunch of mummies trying to wrangle a giant scorpion. So we see it in the distance as we're approaching it, and someone says, "Oh no, we should help." So Dingus thinks, "I'll help," and he throws a fucking javelin from forever away and hits one of the mummies, because God loves me, I roll great. So we go in, we kill all the mummies, and then the scorpion is sort of raging and mad, and I go up to the scorpion and I fucking kill it with the animal handling, even though my modifier is shit. So I calm the scorpion down, and I roll so well that the scorpion's like, "Oh hell yeah, fucking love this guy." And it gives me a little love sting right in the middle of my chest. Take 1 damage and I gain the mark of the scorpion, so it's this Iron Man-like glowing mark in my chest. Also, I just want to note, throughout all of this, Dingus thought he was interacting with some kind of deformed mountain goat. He lives in a cloud, he's never seen a scorpion before. Mark of the deformed mountain goat, OP. Anyway, we continue on, and as we're traveling, I hold claws with the scorpion because we're best friends now. So we get to town, and we figure out where the scorpion's supposed to go, and it goes to a scorpion rancher, and he's fucking thrilled because these mummies have been kidnapping scorpions all over town, and this was his last scorpion stud, and he's just so grateful. And he says, "They usually attack at night, so would you guys be willing to guard my scorpion ranch at night?" And he offers some payment. I don't remember what it was. In character, he didn't really care about gold. He just wanted to get back home, and he had some vague idea that finding a genie might help him get home. But he didn't understand that well because he didn't listen very closely in tribe school. So we spend the night defending the scorpions. There's a mummy attack, of course, because this is a video game. You can't just have a pleasant evening. I think we lose like 1 or 2 female scorpions out of the whole pack, so we did pretty well. We get paid, and as we go into the rancher's house, we meet his Genasi wife, which is like a genie descendant race or something like that. The rancher, by the way, is a toad man, and I never commented on it because I didn't want to be rude, but what the fuck are a Genasi and a toad man doing together? That's like if I married a pretty woman. Anyway, in their house we find, or Dingus finds rather, I don't think the rest of the party saw this, but I find this genie lamp and I go, "Oh hell yeah, genie lamp," and I touch it very rudely. The Genasi wife goes, "Hey, hold on, that's very rude that you're touching my lamp." So I explained to her what the situation is, and she's like, "Well, okay, just because you're such a charming giant. Pretty easy for a dude to be charming when he's tall, am I right, ladies?" She summons a genie, and it turns out that it's her uncle, who is a fire genie, and I don't remember what it's called, but the 4 elements have different names for the type of genie. So the fire genie comes in, he says, "Oh, I use this lamp to keep in touch with my niece sometimes," and I ask him if he can send me back home, and he insults my god, and then he says, "Well, I can't do that. You're gonna have to find an air genie to get you back home." So I say, "You know any?" And he goes, "Hell no, I'm a fire genie. I don't believe in genie race mixing." Which is a pretty backward thing for him to say, but who am I to challenge an incredibly powerful extraplanar monster? Anyway, he continues, "But because you've made such a good impression on me, I'm going to give you this dagger as a token of my favor, and if you do happen to find an air genie, you should show him this dagger and it might get you some treats." He also suggests I look for the Sphinx, who might be able to tell me where to find an air genie, or otherwise give me some tips on how to get home. And then we did go to the Sphinx, but I don't remember how we got to that decision, because the whole genie business is Dingus's side plot, so it's not just for me. Throughout all of this, there's been some fate of the world, watch out for the Scarab King storyline developing that I wasn't paying attention to or forgot because I have 8 intellect. Well, I kind of half remember, and I'm just going to make up the story to sort of fit into that half I remember. So I think the mummies that have been attacking the scorpions and kidnapping them, whenever they don't kidnap them and they just kill them, they always take their organs. And when we were attacked overnight, they had a leader mummy, and we killed him and we got some gem off of him, and then we went to talk to a priest at some local church, and she said, aha, I know what to do next in this storyline based on that gem in your description of the mummy. This is a gem from one of the generals of the Scarab Lord. So basically, there was this guy from a few centuries ago who heard a prophecy that he would die young, but then would be able to rule in the afterlife, like come back. He was very upset about this and he did not want to die young. Mom said I could rule now. So he tried everything he could find. He would look for artifacts, he would make pacts with genies, he would do anything. Heard he even blew a guy, though I'm not sure who told him that would work. But he still died, and then he came back as a mummy lord, which I guess was the backup plan for if he can't stay alive forever. And then he was trapped in his tomb by the Sphinx, and so now he's trying to escape, and he's sending his mummy minions out to get materials for his rituals. Eye of Newt, Blood of a Virgin, Scorpion Gonads. And he has 4 generals, and the one that we already killed in that overnight guard duty thing was Zuzab, who had a jackal head. You know, like Egyptians from the olden days with animal heads? He was the jackal-headed general, and he was the pussiest one, so he was easy to kill. The other 3 are Rosesha, who's the falcon-headed general, Korik, who's the crocodile-headed general, and Donahue, who is, I think, cat-headed. And Donahue is my favorite general. That's a internal call forward. You'll hear about it eventually. So this cleric is telling us, oh no, the Scarab Lord, his generals, mummies, blah blah blah, go to the Sphinx. So we get to the Sphinx, and there's an obelisk outside his lair that has some writing in Primordial, which Dingus speaks because his tribe worships a genie and that's their language. And it has some tips on how to talk to the Sphinx, like you should present a gift, or don't laugh at his name, because his name is Gerald Lamarsa. And Gerald is a funny name for a Sphinx, but if you laugh at him, he'll be greatly insulted, and he's crazy powerful, so don't offend him. So we go in and we meet him, and he's a Sphinx. He's a cat or a lion with feathery wings, and he's playing with a giant ball of yarn because he's a kitty cat. And I meet him and I go, oh great Gerald, I present to you this gift, and I give him a flute, and he does a roll to see if he's offended by my sarcasm. But it was not sarcastic. Dingus is not smart enough to do sarcasm. He's not smart enough to watch Family Guy. That's a smart person show. So we talked to Gerald, the Red Sphinx. We explained what's going on, and he goes, oh fuck, the Scarab King Lord guy. Yeah, I locked him up in his tomb, but if he ever gets out, he'll fuck me up. There's some reason why he could do it in the past, but now he'd be too strong. And the Scarab King can't get into Gerald's lair, so he's safe there. But if Gerald ever leaves and runs into the Scarab King, he'd be pretty fucked. So Gerald gives us some tips on where to go, how to fight the Scarab King, etc. And I don't remember what she did, but the Kenku artificer, the bird lady, did something to make a good impression on him, and he gifted her one of his feathers, and he said, you can use this to call for my help in some time of need. So she held on to that. Then we travel a bit, we head to the tomb, and we enter the tomb, and in front of us is this big heavy door, and we try to open it, but we are too weak. Even Dingus, who's so tall. But then the druid used a spell to shrink the door to half its size so we could just walk right past it. Except when he shrunk the door, it turns out there were a bunch of mummies on the other side, and the one closest to the door was Korik, the crocodile general. So he came to the door and he used his greatsword to curb stomp the nearest person, who happened to be the druid. And that attack broke his concentration on the shrink door spell, causing it to spring back to its original size, effectively trapping Korik in here with us and leaving all his mummy buddies in the other room. So all alone with none of his allies, suddenly Korik was the curb stompee. And that's how we accidentally employed incredible tactics to isolate and dominate one of the generals. And then there's some looting, exploration puzzles, etc. At one point, we found this hallway blocked by this giant gelatinous cube, and it turns out if you throw some caltrops down in front of it, it'll just bounce off those forever until it kills itself. So we go through the tomb and we come up to the room where we find Rosesha with her rosy cheeks and skin disease, and she's the falcon-headed general. She's kind of a roguey, assassin-y type, whereas Korik was a brute strength greatsword guy, and Zuzap was just a bitch. So Rosesha had this suit of armor where daggers hung down all along her arms like feathers on wings. Get it? Like a falcon. And she was standing in the room, clustered up with a bunch of her mummy minions, and the goblin artificer, he just dropped a bomb on him, and he fucked them up pretty bad. Probably took out half the mummies, and the rest were in pretty bad shape. And then Rosesha was like, oh fuck, right at the beginning they're fucking us up, so she ran behind a pillar and hid. And I thought, as Dingus the Barbarian, well, this fight seems to be going pretty well in our favor, and I only have one rage left, and I know that we have multiple generals left. I'm just gonna run right up to her without raging and see if I can find her. And if you don't know how D&D works, raging gives me resistance to damage, which means I take half damage on any kind of weapon damage, bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing. So if you hit me for 10, instead I take 5 damage. So I ran around the pillar, and there she was, and she stabbed me right in the ribs, and I took the full damage of the weapon attack and also the poison on the weapons. Except the poison I had resistance to thanks to Mark of the Scorpion, so my Tony Stark chest battery absorbed half the poison. It still came out to a total of like 30 something damage. I think 38 damage. At the level we were at, that's more than a max health of everyone in the party except me. But because I was a tank, I could still survive it that rage next turn, and it was good. So then next turn I rage and I get my damage resistance up. And since I charged in way ahead of my party like a retard, all the mummies plus Rosesha surrounded me as the nearest target. She also summoned a few mummies behind me for the party to deal with, but they could handle that while I was just holding the general and these minions in a corner. The mummies were content to just sit there and keep trying to hit me, and with armor and resistance they weren't really doing much. Rosesha was trying to get away so she could fuck up the rest of the party, but I have this feat that allows me to hit people trying to get away even if they do it safely with a disengage action. And if I hit them, they have to stop moving. So she tried to escape and I bonked her and said, no, fuck you, stay here. And then I shuffled over to sit next to her again and waited for her to move so I could bonk her again. Realizing that I wasn't going to let her get away, she decided she just had to knife me. So she started pulling dagger after dagger from her wingsuit and stabbed me over and over. So probably for 3 turns, I kind of just sat there getting gangbanged while my party cleared up the rest of the mummies and caught up. And eventually she managed to dodge one of my bonks and get away, escaping into another room. And at that point, I was down to 3 health. So we cleaned up the remaining mummies, and Vortrin, the best guy, he slapped me on the back of the head, gave me a big heal, took a chug of beer. And then I sprinted into the next room, because if I go a turn without attacking someone or taking damage, I'll fall out of my rage. And I couldn't get close enough to whack her, but all I had to do was attack, I didn't have to hit, so I did this Hail Mary javelin throw off the ceiling, around behind an obelisk where she's hiding, and I still managed to get a good poke on her. And then everybody else caught up and, we just killed her. So after this fight, I was still quite low on health, even though I had gotten that heal. I think at that level I probably had like 55 or something total health, and with all the resistances plus heals, I'd probably taken like 100 damage total throughout the fight, and probably half of that was poison. So Mark of the Scorpion was glowing bright green and throbbing, and we looked at it, and Vorter and I decided, hey DM, do you think we could milk this Mark of the Scorpion and get some of that poison out? And the DM was like, yeah, sure, you guys milk Dingus and get 2 vials of poison. At this point, I have no rages left, so this next fight, which we assume was Donahue because he's the only general left, I was thinking, boy, are we fucked because I cannot tank. So we find this hallway, and as we're going down, there's a closed door at the end, and we can hear voices through it, and we can hear them talking about these intruders that came into the tomb and how they're wondering if Rosesha's done killing them yet. So we start thinking about, okay, how do we want to do this? And we come up with the most retarded idea. We decide, alright, so the Kenku can perfectly mimic any voice she's heard. So Rosesha had only said a couple of words to us, so that's all she had to work with as far as mimicking, and the Warlock could cast a disguise spell or like an illusion on her. So what we did was, the Goblin got on the Kenku's shoulders, and the Warlock put that spell on him, and then the rest of us just sort of held our hands behind our backs, while still holding our weapons. And our plan was, okay, we'll go in, we'll pretend that she's Rosesha and that she captured us and we're all prisoners, and we'll see how it goes. And the GM was like, I've run this campaign 3 or 4 times and no one has ever tried the 3 men in a trench coat approach, so just go for it, I want to see what happens. So we go in, Donahue sees us, and he has like a mummy mage companion and maybe some minion mummies. And he goes, Rosesha, good job, you captured the intruders. So we file in and, we stand against a wall looking beaten and captured. And he's looking at us and he goes, Rosesha, why do they still have their weapons? Why didn't you take their weapons away? What's wrong with you? Come on. What is this? Amateur hour? And she's responding in whatever combination she can make of 4 words and a war shriek to try to pull off this ruse. And Donahue is just not understanding. So eventually we get to this point where we think, I don't know how much longer we can keep this up, so let's just fucking sneak attack. And so the Warlock uses a message spell to send a telepathic message and tell everyone, now, fucking jump them. And what happens next, through focus fire and because the fighter was so fucking min-maxed, we got a surprise round for the 3 men in a trench coat ruse, which means we all got to take a full round before the enemies got to go. So this door fighter, he sprinted up, tackled Donahue, beat the shit out of him, and the rest was just fucking threw our javelins, whatever the fuck we had, spells. And Donahue died before he ever got to take an action. And as he was dying, he never figured out that this was not his sister, General Rosesha. So as he's getting beaten, he's like, Rosesha, why aren't you helping me? Please, what's wrong? Stop it. And his last words were, Rosesha, what are you doing? What's happening? And just the pure innocence of this retarded mummy. Just so innocent, so naive. You would think being an ancient, evil mummy wizard living in a tomb, you'd have a little more sense than that. Oh, that's fucking adorable. Donahue's my favorite. But then his companion was kind of fucking us up because he ran away, he made it to this pool of life essence, and he did some mummy sorcery that started sand pouring into the room from a hole in the ceiling. The DM drew on the battle grid this meter of sand fullness, and the meter only had maybe 5 slots, and then he rolled a d4 to see how much sand filled up the room. I think he rolled a 3 on the first one. So before anyone could even respond, we were more than halfway dead, like suffocated in a sand room, because the door was locked behind us, and I think the Warlock, for some reason, got locked in the hallway, so we were all fighting, and then the Warlock was just chilling in the hallway, not knowing what was going on. So while everybody was fighting, I coordinated my action with the Druid, so I ran up to the hole, and he cast a spell to double the size of my shield, and I held the shield up to the hole trying to block it and stop sand from pouring in. And I did that for several turns, just holding it there, making strength checks and just slowing it. So I think what happened was when the DM had to make his d4 roll to fill up the room, he had to make it at disadvantage, which meant he rolled twice and took the lower number. And that probably did save us because it came out to 1, and then I think maybe there was something we did that might have reduced the level a little bit. In any case, that whole fight, I was just holding the shield up to the hole trying to stop us from all suffocating while everybody else killed the mummies and whatever. And then we finished the fight, killed everybody. Someone picked up the mummy assistant spellbook and found a way to cancel the sand filling up the room effect. So it didn't just stop the sand, but it vanished the sand that was already in the room because it was all magic. So that left us with just the Scarab King to kill, and we jumped into the pool of vitality to get a mini rest, so I got some of my rages back so we wouldn't be so fucked. We also explored the tomb a little bit, and we found the armory where I found an animated shield and an animated greatsword pair. The shield was named Hudson and the sword was named Quinn. And I took both because I'm a greedy barbarian, which allowed me to have the shield floating around me so I could still use the two-handed greatsword, and I could swing with it and then as a bonus action have it fly out and swing again, so I would be taking 3 hits a turn. And they also talked, and they were weirdly sexual, so I had to agree to make a triad with them, implying that this was like a sexual relationship for the 3 of us. And that was the DM's idea. I was not the one being a sweaty little homo. Also in the armory, next to Hudson and Quinn, we find a dagger sheath, which pairs with my dagger, except Vortrin was the one who activated the sheath, because I was busy talking to the weapons, and so he had the genie. And I talked to him and he said, if you free me from this tomb, I'll take you back home. We have the deal, but he was still Vortrin's genie. So he took the sheath and, we moved on. Anyway, we get into the Scarab King's tomb where we find him and some of his high priests doing some kind of ritual that I guess would free him. We do our fighting. The DM had this really cool mechanic where, because mummies, when they're being embalmed, have their organs removed, there are clusters of pots scattered around the room, and each cluster contained one of his organs, so you could go and find his organ, destroy it, and that would immediately do some damage to him. I don't think we got all of them, but at least like 3 or 4 of the 5 total. So if you find the organ, you destroy it, and he had little cups on the battlefield, and you would pick which one you wanted to uncover, and that would have a die in it to roll for how much damage you did. And they'd be different die sizes, so like a D6 or a D12, whatever. And the way Mummy Lords work, you have to destroy the heart, or 24 hours after you kill him, he respawns. It was just a neat mechanic, because the Scarab King was dangerous to be near, so if you could damage him by just breaking a few pots instead of getting real close to him, probably a good idea. But the fighter and I, being the 2 melee guys, did get close to him, and I think each of us went down 2 times throughout the fight, and then someone would heal us up, we'd get up and hit him, and he would kill us again. Or knock us unconscious, put us on death saving throws. But our casters supporting really fucking carried the show, because one of them put haste on the fighter who's already min-max, so he probably did most of the damage to the general throughout the fight, and I think Vortrin blessed 3 of us, and then they just hid in corners holding the concentration while we tanked and did damage and whatever. One thing that was neat was I had a class feature where if I hit someone with an attack, I summon ancestral spirits that kind of swarm them and give them disadvantage when they're attacking anyone except me. So for a series of turns, what happened was I would hit the Scarab King and put this effect on him. He would turn around and fucking kill me. And then, because he was the legendary high-level creature, he got to take multiple turns per round. So he would turn around and he would hit the fighter or whoever else was near him, and I'd say, you got disadvantage on that, because even though I'm dead, my spirits last until my next turn. And the DM was like, are you fucking serious? What the hell? And so I would hit him, he'd kill me, he'd try to attack other people and miss everything because I had the disadvantage on him. Someone would heal me up from a distance, I'd get up and hit him again, and he'd fucking kill me again, and then the same thing would repeat. I think this happened for 3 rounds. And then one of the enemies managed to finish the ritual to open a portal that would take him from the tomb to the outside world. I think it would open it right in the middle of Dunehaven. And then this trapdoor opened out of the floor, like this really big trapdoor, and you could see stairs going down, and mummies just started shuffling up, a whole mass of them. And Vortrin fucking badass that he is, he'd use his cleric feature like Turn Undead or something in the form of a tidal wave of beer. He fucking wiped out half the mummy pack and took out a dozen more down the stairs. But then more kept coming up, and eventually I think a handful of mummies got through the portal, and then the Scarab King got through the portal. And I think when the portal opened, the Kenku was like, oh fuck, I think now we're in trouble. So she got the feather and she activated it and got in contact with Gerald, who you still can't make fun of. Gerald said, tell me where to go and I'll come and try to help, and she directed him to go to Dunehaven to try to close the portal from the other side. So we all go through the portal, the Scarab King gets through, we all follow him in. And we get out there and the Scarab King kills Gerald. I forgot to mention this before, but the Scarab King used pistols as his weapon. And he had this special bullet that was like the kill shot that he'd been saving for Gerald. He almost used it on her fighter at one point in the fight, but I guess the DM decided to hold it. So he just fucking blasted Gerald, because you're in the wrong neighborhood, cuh. And I think we healed Gerald up, and then stuff happened, and we finally bring down the Scarab King. And this is at like pre-dawn in the middle of Dunehaven, and nobody woke up, nobody noticed that there was this epic battle happening in the town square. So now that the Scarab King is dead, and this portal is still open, you know, we got our hurrahs, we heal up whoever was low or dead. Vortrin summons the genie he found. His name was Gregory. And Vortrin asked Gregory to go into the tomb and get all the treasure for us. Because Gregory was an air genie, so he could whirlwind everything up, right? And the tomb had started collapsing after the Scarab King left. So Gregory says, okay, fine. He goes through the portal and just fucking throws everything out of the portal. Just fucking whirlwinds it up and just shoots it out. So we're being pelted by like gold coins and treasure. And also the stone pillars that were holding up the ceiling. And I got hit one of them, and I died again after the fight was over. So everybody collected their loot, and Vortrin brought me back to life, and he made some comment. How many times am I going to save you? And I said, how many times are you going to get me killed? And we laughed and had a grand time. But Dingus turned down his share of the gold and just went to Gregory and said, so we had a deal, right? You're going to take me back home? And he said, a deal's a deal. So he fucking shot me back home to Zephyr Summit, and everybody else did whatever they were doing. Now we're kind of getting into epilogue time mode. Shut up. So at the table, while we were still in the session, my epilogue was, as you guys are collecting up your gold, the shortest Goliath you've ever seen, a 7'2" manlet, walks up and asks, hey, y'all motherfuckers seen my nephew? Cause that's Zoland! Before that last session with the Scarab King fight, the DM told us to bring backup characters, and I made mine Dingus' uncle, Zoland. And that was a session, basically. In Discord, where we were organizing the games, we had our own personal epilogues, and I read everybody else's, and theirs were entire lifetime stories, whereas mine was like 2 days after. So what happened with Dingus was, Gregory brings him back home, and he finds out he's exiled. Partially because he just wandered off like a retard and abandoned his tribe, but also he came back with this Iron Man green glowing mark on his chest, and he was only gone for a couple of days, and he came back aged. Oh yeah, there's a thing called mummy rot, where every time a mummy hits you, you have to do a constitution save, and if you fail, you get aged. So Dingus was 20 when he started this adventure, and in a couple of days he aged 12 years, so he came back home 32. The aging thing really fucked up the Kenku, the bird person, because they live like 50 years total. Anyway, Dingus is exiled, and he finds out that his uncle Zoland left Zephyr Summit to go look for him and bring him back home. So Dingus goes to Gastish and asks him to help, either get him back into the tribe or help bring Zoland back, and he finds out, one, that Gastish knew he was down there, knew where he was, and just chose not to bring him back up because that would have been boring. And two, that Gastish doesn't like Zoland, and in a rage he blows Dingus when asked to bring back Zoland. and naturally gaseous, spits. He just summons a gust of wind and throws Dingus up into the air, and then his cousin, Zolan's daughter, saves him, and then they go down and look for Zolan, and that's basically where it ends. And also Dingus finally realizes that his nickname is an insult. And that's that story. I don't know how well that works for entertainment value versus collecting like 10 campaigns and just having the funniest moments in them. But then I would play 10 campaigns. Why are you so entitled? I do wish I could play with my friends though. Partially because I want to be able to call my co-players faggots. But also because game shops tend to have just a high level of autism, and some types of autism are fun, but some types are... My games are all combat and railroading between combats. There's no fun, there's no social interaction. Don't try to socially interact or I will have a guard knock you out. Maybe I'm being unfair. Maybe I'm not. This one is pretty lazy in general. As low effort as everything I do is, this is even more so. The D&D stories are usually kind of easy. I'm just going to blitz this out without putting too much work into it because I want to take a couple months, maybe, to focus on life/work shit and another project that I'd like to finish soon. Stay toasty, roasties.